So this is how I made this. This is how I made the fire table step by step. I got a lot of good ideas from other people, so hopefully if you're watching this and you want to do it yourself, you'll get a lot of ideas from me, and I'll show you the mistakes I made along the way. And yeah, here's how it goes. So I used 2x3s to make the frame, and I screwed in 4-inch screws. Just with I used a pilot bit first of all, just to make sure there's no splitting in the wood or anything cut. And I used 20mm by 150mm fence panels in a triangular formation, just to give it the structure like more stability. And the framework was absolutely solid, so I'm happy with all that. I then nailed in 100mm timber feather edge board panels. I've seen them before, use them for like small fences, and I thought it looked quite nice. And they're thinner at one side than the other side. I then checked, I put the cylinder inside the table to make sure the table itself wouldn't hit the top of the cylinder, and luckily enough all my measurements worked out just fine. I used black fence paint, like weatherproof Ronseals black fence paint, and it honestly took me about 5 or 6 coats to get it this colour. Even on the fourth coat, it was nowhere near how black I wanted it, so it took about 6 coats to get exactly the colour I wanted it. And once it was done, it's been that colour ever since, and it's not faded at all, so I'm really happy with it. But it did take a lot of coats. To make the mould for the table, I used 20mm MDF. Looking back now, I wish I used 25mm, just so if you doubled it up, it would be 50, and it would be so much easier to use for the sizes I wanted for the table. But I had 20 lying around, so I used that, and it's a little bit more difficult to get the sizes I wanted out of that, but it still worked. I marked out where the gas burner was going to sit next inside the table, and I built up the MDF 3 layers. If it was 25mm, it would have been 2 layers and it would have been perfect, but I had to build up 3 layers to get the 50mm depth that I wanted. First mistake. I then siliconed around the edges of the table, just so there's no leaks while pouring the concrete. To reinforce the concrete, I actually used my old dog's cage, and I fixed it with steel wire. It was lying around and it's not getting used though. I checked online and it was extortionate for rebar prices, so that seemed to work perfectly, and just tied it together with steel wire, and I can make it in the perfect mold, perfect shape, and it worked perfectly. I ordered the gas burner from Amsterdam. I looked at a lot of places in Britain and I just couldn't find it. I honestly could not find it anywhere. There was make one yourself, but even then they were all sold out. So I just ordered it from there, and it came over, I think it was within a week. I used grill metal mesh over the top of it. Here's a little money saving tip for you. If you put lava rocks at the bottom of the burner, put on the grill metal mesh over the top of it, and then you put on your fire glass over the top of that, because fire glass is quite expensive. So if you put it over the top of the mesh, none of it will fall in, and you'll get a big like heap of it, and it'll look really nice, and you're hardly spending any money on it, because that glass, if you filled up the whole lot with fire glass, it would have been a fortune. But that's a little money saving tip for you there. I used sharp sand and concrete 3:1 ratio when I was mixing the concrete, and just use a mixer. Definitely use a mixer. I know you can get that tubs that you can, big massive kind of crate things that you mix together, but honestly, just use a mixer. It would be an absolute hassle if I tried to do it by hand. And yeah, use a mixer. End of story. I then wanted to add some features to the table, so I used epoxy resin molds. I used 10mm foam that was printed off. I printed pictures of the internet, and I used 10mm foam to cut out the design. It was a Scottish themed like table, so I just thought of the most Scottish things I could, and that was a Highland cow, Loch Ness monster, a thistle, and a stag. To fix down, I sprayed on spray on glue just to fix it down, so once the mold was getting poured, it wouldn't move around at all. To make sure the concrete came out easy, I used WD-40 and olive oil. I saw that online, and it worked perfectly. I put that down first of all, and when I took out the mold, it came out like a breeze. I poured the first half, and then I added my reinforcements / dog cage, and I poured the next half, and then I just smoothed it over with a finishing trowel and used some water. I waited 3 days before I tried to take it off, and it says 24 hours to 48 hours, but I was taking no chances. And what I found out with this project is if I ever rushed anything, it didn't go as well. If you're doing anything, take your time. Honestly, take your time with everything, and it will just come out so much better. This is my favorite part right here of the whole table. Oh my god, this was just the best ever. Taking this, oh look at it. That's just like, they call it the AMSR or something. It's just, oh, peeling that stuff off was just one of the greatest parts of my life. Look at it, oh my god. I don't know why it's so satisfying. Once the table came out of the mold, there was holes in it. This is like mistake number 2. I would say mistake number 2, but I honestly vibrated this table so much. If you don't vibrate the table, air bubbles get trapped in the concrete, and it makes that air bubble holes, and it sets that way. But I honestly did. I vibrated the table so much, so I would say it's a mistake, but I said I would deal with it. So what I had to do then was make some slur mix. That's what it's called. I'm sure it's called slur mix. So it's concrete, a bonding agent, and water. And I just mixed it up, and you can see me there just pushing it in the holes. It worked absolutely perfectly. I used it without the bonding agent, just used it with concrete and water, and it was terrible. So that's mistake number 3. You've got to use a bonding agent in the mix to make sure this stuff sticks inside the holes. And after using that, it was just honestly perfect. You wouldn't even know those holes there anymore. Next, I went on to sanding it. I sanded it with 80 grit and all the way up to 240 grit. And same again, just took my time with it. I used a sanding machine first off for the top. Same again, just took my time. Felt it over my hands. Any bits that were rough on it, did it again. And then I did the edges with a hand sander to make sure that I didn't break out any edges. In the edges, I can't even speak today. Break out in the edges, or it was less rough on it. This to say that if you just use it by hand. So I made sure that all the corners were nice and safe and nice and smooth, no sharp edges, and I was really happy with that. Next, I used a water sealant. It was just, I think I used 7 coats on this. In between the coats, I used a hairdryer just to speed up the drying process, because 7 coats is quite a lot, and even though it takes like 10 minutes to dry in between each application, it sped up a little bit. So I used a hairdryer in between each coat, and it worked out perfectly. You can actually see it drying in front of your face, just because it's just such thin coats that you're putting on. But after it was done, the water beaded off it perfectly. The water lied on it as well. There's nothing soaked in, and I was really happy with the outcome at the end of it. Peeling the mold off was my favourite part, and this next part was my wife's favourite part. She absolutely loved this. Look at her face. Just picking out the foam molds for the epoxy resin to get poured into. Don't recommend using a screw like I did there, and wear gloves. But I ended up getting a screwdriver in, and just everything worked solid. It was, I've got to admit as well, it was quite satisfying taking out of the molds. Just make sure I got every single last bit, because the foam molds that I had in actually had paper on the back of it, so I made sure all the paper was out as well before I poured anything. And 10mm is quite thick, so it did get there's a lot of space for the epoxy resin to go in, and you can mix it around. The next part was actually making the epoxy resin, mixing it up and pouring it out. And what I found, this stuff is quite dangerous, can be very dangerous, because it heats up rapidly. it can burn your eyes, and just so you've got to wear gloves and goggles and all the protection when you do it, because this epoxy resin, once it dries harder than the concrete is actually set in. This stuff is absolutely solid. So we got blue metallic epoxy resin, and we mixed it in, and you could actually make the kind of shade you wanted it with the dark blue. I see there I actually used a heater to speed up the process again, but we mix it around, because as it's set in, you can actually mix around the design of it, and the darker blue comes through at the top, and you can kind of mix it around to set the design. So we're a lot of fun doing that. Mistake number 3 that I learnt is, once you're mixing the mold around, once it starts drying, the mold starts moving. Well, the pigments in the epoxy resin that we got. So I got the perfect design that I wanted, and I came back to this. It actually looks like it's got a mullet, but I managed to mix it just enough so I can get the design I was happy with. But what I learned is, as it dries, the design on it moves. So if you want to get it just the exact design that you want, move it around a little bit more with like a knife or whatever you were using. Mistake number 4, the gas burner came with a green regulator. Over here in Britain we use red ones, so it wasn't a big thing. I just cut it off, put in a Jubilee clip, tightened it really hard, and it worked perfectly. So I was chuffed with that. Next I put on handles / knockers. I designed it from one of my favourite movies was Labyrinth, and my very talented sister printed it off for me. Only thing I had to buy was the filament for her, and she's got a 3D printing machine, so very talented, and she managed just to print it off no problem, and it came out amazing. They were a little bit shiny, she says, so she says she wanted to get that kind of rustic kind of look. She did a dark wash over them, and she was right. They came out looking obviously like used, but look perfect for what we were using it for. And they kind of like even a little bit gargoyle-y, is that a word? A little bit of a gargoyle, but yeah, they come out looking just spot on. I was happy with the result, and it just gives that last little touch to the table, and I was really happy with it. Next I added the fireglass. Went with aqua blue because obviously that was the epoxy resin design, and if you remember my money saving tip back at the start of the video, you will know how to save money on that. Next I wanted to finish it off the Scottish theme with some old Scottish sayings on the side of the table, and I wanted it to glow in the dark obviously. So my sister recommended this place called Cultured Hustle, and they make the bluest, they say it's the bluest blue glow in the dark you can get in the world, and after the results I got, I can say yes, it is. I mixed it in with, they've got a stuff called Super Base, and it just makes it, obviously it's like a glue, and it dries hard, and it's absolutely amazing, glows in the dark, and it's so bright, it's unreal. I'm so happy with the results of it. And that is how I made my fire table. If you've got any questions, write in the comments and I'll answer them. Anything at all. I've probably missed out a million things, but anything you're not sure about, just give me a message at the bottom and I'll answer any questions I can. And just thanks for watching.